is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to this brand new week of broadcasting on the American Family Radio Talk Network. Brian Fisher is my name, and the program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. And my name is Brian Fisher. Great to have you in the conversation today. We got a lot we're going to get to today. We're going to talk about this budget mess. We're going to talk about immigration. We're going to talk about a lot of other stuff today, and we'll get to that as the program develops. Right now, at the beginning of the program, we want to do as we customarily do and turn our attention to the Word of God. We're using a schedule you can find at pray.afa.net, and we are going through the book of Job. And Job, this book spends a lot of chapters right here in the middle of the book, a lot of chapters dealing with Job processing the fact that he is suffering without justification. He cannot find any basis for his suffering. Any basis on which he deserves it, any basis on which this suffering, this brutal suffering he is experiencing, can at all be traced to his behavior or as a consequence or a discipline or a punishment for his sins. As far as he can tell, his hands are clean. Even God says at the beginning of the book, and Job didn't know this, but God himself said, look, Job is blameless and he is upright. He turns away from evil and turns toward me. And in fact, he actually kind of enticed Satan to go after Job. And Satan said, well, you take away the hedge you built around him and he'll curse you to his face. And so God says, well, have at it. He destroys everything that Job owns, destroys his family, destroys all his possessions, and still Job did not curse God to his face. Satan says, well, look, you let me touch his body. You told me to stay away from his health the first time around. If I compromise his health, he'll curse you to his face. So God says, well, have at it. So these sores break out all over Job's body. He spends all his time scraping him with these broken pieces of pottery, and still he doesn't curse God to his face. And yet Job cannot discover a reason why he should be suffering, how this could be some kind of punishment for his sin. And remember, his friends trying to help him, they bought into the lie, which is a shallow part of theology, that suffering is always a consequence of sin. You know, we know what the Bible teaches. If you sow to the flesh, you shall from the flesh reap corruption. So you sin, something bad is going to happen to you. So people falsely reason from that. They start with the second part of that premise, that something bad has happened to you, and they reason backward. That must mean you have been sowing to the flesh. There must be some sin in your life, and this suffering, this adversity is a result. But what Job teaches us, the book of Job teaches us, is that not all suffering is a result of our sin. There can be other things that explain suffering in our life. Sin does in the end produce suffering, but the equation of Job's friends was simply wrong, that sin leads to suffering. Therefore, if you are suffering, it is because of your sin. Now, Job is one of the oldest, maybe the oldest book in the Bible. So one of the first books that God produced was designed to deal with the problem of suffering and to explode this falsehood that suffering is always the evidence of sin, that suffering is always caused by sin, that if you can't see the sin that's causing it is because somebody's hiding it. Somebody has unconfessed sin, and he's concealing it from everybody, and Job just blows that theory completely out of the water. Now, it's simplistic. This is a simplistic theology because it fails to take into account the fact that there may be other sources of suffering, other causes of suffering, other reasons for suffering. Suffering may come because God allows it to purify and to mature his saints, and that's what he's doing in the life of Job. That's why at the end of this book, Job repents in dust and ashes, because he realizes what God was doing, trying to do through the suffering in his life. C.S. Lewis has this interesting passage in Mere Christianity where we complain about the suffering we're experiencing. And he says that's because we think that all God was interested in doing was just a little bit of remodeling. Put some fresh drains in here and run a wing out here. And he says, no, that's not what God is interested in at all. He wants to tear this thing down to the foundation, and he's interested in building on top of this foundation a majestic mansion that he intends to come and live in it himself. So Job's friends were getting impatient with him for being so stubborn. He said, come on already, quit being such a mule and confess your hidden sin. This is just a bunch of hot air coming out of your mouth. Eliphaz the Temanite says in the beginning of chapter 15, should a wise man answer with windy knowledge and fill his belly with the east wind? Should he argue an unprofitable talk or in words with which he can do no good? So they say, Job, you're just a big, inflated, self-righteous gas bag. And says you're setting a bad example for others. Other people are going to imitate you, Job, and they're going to insist that they're innocent. They're going to conceal their sin. They're going to refuse to confess it before God, and that will be your fault. He says, you are doing away with the fear of God and hindering meditation before God, for your iniquity teaches your mouth. Then they get after him. Who do you think you are? What unmitigated gall you have to think that you are smarter than we are, that you know more about theology and sin and suffering than we do. Are you, they say, the first man who was born? Or were you brought forth before the hills? Have you listened in the counsel of God? And do you limit wisdom to yourself? What do you know that we do not know? And what do you understand that is not clear to us? Both the gray-haired and the aged are among us, older than your father. So they say, look, you have despised the good things that God has done for you, and your pride has turned you in your blindness and rebellion against God. So they say, are the comforts of God too small for you? Or the word that deals gently with you? Why does your heart carry you away, and why do your eyes flash that you turn your spirit against God and bring such words out of your mouth? What is man that he can be pure? Or he who is born of a woman that he can be righteous? Behold, God puts no trust in his holy ones, and the heavens are not pure in his sight. How much less one like you, Job, who is abominable and corrupt, a man who drinks injustice like water. So they say, look, Job, everybody but you seems to know that your suffering is God's punishment for your sin. You are despising the wisdom of the ages. All the smart, wise men know that this is how things work. So they say, for instance, the wicked man writhes in pain all his days, through all the years that are laid up for the ruthless, because he has stretched out his hand against God, defies the Almighty, running stubbornly against him. And finally, Job, we're going to finish up on the other side of this break, but Job finally has had it with these guys. And he says, look, you guys are nothing but a sad sack bunch of gas bags. It's all hot air, and I'm sick to death of listening to you guys. I could say the same stuff to you that you were saying to me. We'll explore that when we get back. Focal Point, American Family Radio.
Hey, my name's Brant. You ever make a change and then wonder, why didn't I do this a long time ago? That's what's happening for thousands of people with regard to their health care. They're joining Medishare, and then they're wondering, why didn't I already do this? For most members, it costs less than half what they were paying for their old health plan. There's a huge provider network, too. You can customize your plan, and this is awesome. Medishare members can go online with a doctor 24/7. So if you need a prescription for the flu or something, it's so convenient for you and your family. So yeah, this is one of those, why did I wait on this things? And if you don't love your current health plan, you're not stuck with it. You can join Medishare anytime. By the way, to give you an idea, the typical savings for a family, about $500 a month. It just makes so much sense. Check it out. They're super easy to talk to. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
The borrower is the slave of the lender. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Corner. Congress has just passed a sweeping 2-year budget agreement that increases spending by several $100 billion. It includes $89 billion in supplemental disaster relief, $63 billion in other non-defense spending, $300 billion for the Pentagon, and a suspension of the debt limit. All this while we have $22 trillion in debt, and that number doesn't include unfunded mandates. The real national debt number is much, much higher. Fiscal responsibility no longer seems to be a priority for the Republican Party. Conservative and Republican are not synonymous terms.
Listen to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Central on AFR. For more from Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. We're walking through the dialogue between Job and his friends. Job finally just interrupts this Eliphaz guy. He's just had all he could take. Said, look, I'm sick to death of listening to you guys. This is what he says to them. Job answered and said, chapter 16, I have heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all. Maybe you've had that experience. People come and self-righteously try to rebuke you and try to help you see the error of your ways, and it just makes things worse instead of better. And this was Job's experience. Shall windy words have an end? What provokes you that you answer? I could speak as you do. If you were in my place, I could join words together against you and shake my head at you. I could strengthen you with my mouth, and the solace of my lips would assuage your pain. If I speak, my pain is not assuaged, and if I forbear, how much of it leaves me? Job says, look, there's nothing I do that works here. If I don't see anything, my pain doesn't go anywhere. It's still there. If I speak, also the pain does not go anywhere. It doesn't do any good. And finally, he complains to God. He says, God, you are wearing me out. Surely now God has worn me out. He has made desolate all my company, and he has shriveled me up. He has torn me in his wrath and hated me. He has gnashed his teeth at me. My adversary sharpens his eyes against me. God gives me up to the ungodly. Now, so the friends say, look, everybody but you seems to know that you're at fault for this. And Job, you seem to be the only one that doesn't get it, that doesn't pick it up, that hasn't tumbled at this thing. And Job finally says, look, I know this is God's doing. I know this is God's doing. I agree with you about that. But this still isn't fair because I haven't done anything to deserve this. He said, God gives me up to the ungodly, cast me into the hands of the wicked. I was at ease, and he broke me apart. He seized me by the neck and dashed me to pieces. He set me up as his target. His archers surrounded me. He slashes open my kidneys and does not spare. He pours out my gall on the ground. He breaks me with breach upon breach, runs upon me like a warrior. My face is red with weeping, and on my eyelids is deep darkness, although there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. Finally, in chapter 18, he says, I'm just about ready to throw in, or chapter 17, I'm just about done. I'm ready to throw in the towel. I'm just about ready to quit. I don't think I can take it anymore. He says in the first 17, verse 1, my spirit is broken. My days are past. My plans are broken off. The desires of my heart. So he thinks that the best days are behind him. There's nothing but dark days ahead, nothing but gloomy days ahead, and he's about ready to throw in the towel. But there's one ray of hope that he finds breaking through the clouds. This is what he says down in verse 18. Let's see. Where am I? That's not the right set of verses. Okay, I got to find my place here because this is the crux of what I wanted to get to. And where are my verses? Booga, 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 booga. Well, I don't know what happened here. I've lost my verses. All right, here we go. It's back in chapter 16. I was off by one chapter. That's why I got confused myself here. But here's the one piece of sunshine that breaks through the clouds for Job. He says this, O earth, cover not my blood, and let my cry find no resting place. In other words, he wants his cry to continue to ascend to God, that there will be somebody up there who will hear his cry. And then he says this, here's where he finds some comfort and consolation. Even now, he says, behold, my witness is in heaven, and he who testifies for me is on high. My friends scorn me, my eye pours out tears to God, but I have a witness on high who will argue the case of a man with God as a son of man does with his neighbor. And I believe he's talking here about the same one that's described in Hebrews 7:25 for us. Remember, Jesus is described there as the one who always lives to make intercession for us. We have reason to hope because we have an intercessor in the heavens who always lives to make intercession for us. He has a priesthood permanently. He continues forever. Consequently, he is able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. And that was Job's hope, that he had an intercessor with a permanent priesthood who would always be there, always living to make intercession, to appeal his case, to plead with him before God himself. Now, the prayer that I've written for this section of Scripture is like the ones we prayed before. It's a prayer for a man who's suffering unjustly. He does not understand why. If you've got a friend that's in that situation, put yourself in his place. Pray this prayer for him by proxy. You may be in that place. You're suffering terribly, and you have a hard time understanding why. Then you can pray this prayer for yourself. Let's go to prayer. Sovereign Lord, my friends accuse me of turning my spirit against you, and they say that my heart has carried me away. They tell me that iniquity is teaching my mouth, and that I have chosen the tongue of the crafty. And yet, Lord, I have searched my heart and my life, and there is no violence in my hands. My motives in prayer are pure. But it seems, Lord, as though you have worn me out. You have made desolate all my company by turning even my friends against me. You have shriveled me up and torn me in your wrath. My face is red with weeping, and on my eyelids is deep darkness. My eye pours out tears to you, that you would allow me to argue my case with you, as a son of man does with his neighbor. But even in my pain, I choose to walk in righteousness and hold to my way. I choose to believe that he who has clean hands will in time grow stronger and stronger. I trust that there is a witness for me in heaven, and that there is one on high who testifies for me. All this I pray in the name of Jesus, the one who always lives to make intercession for the saints. Amen. All right, we will continue our reading through the book of Job, and if you'd like to pick up with us and read and pray along with us, you can go to pray.afa.net. You'll find a fresh passage for tomorrow and a prayer for that passage of Scripture, and you can read and pray right along with us. I want to remind you about the project that we're involved in right now, which is to encourage you to support the work of India Partners. It's a project for the rest of this week. As we've mentioned before, boys and girls as young as 8 are being trafficked into the sex industry in Mumbai, India. And in fact, let's see, Jeff, if we could grab a soundbite at this point. And you grab one for us here in just a minute? Okay, Let me just finish with this. But boys and girls as young as 8, they're being trafficked and sold into the red light areas of Mumbai, India. And many of the young girls become mothers as soon as their bodies enable them to conceive because of where they're put in this red light district. They become mothers at a very, very young age. So you've got very young mothers. You have their infant children. Now, what India Partners has done is they've built these safe houses for both for girls, young women, and for guys, young boys, away from the red light district of Mumbai, so that children who have been trafficked can escape the brothel areas. They can be relocated, and these safe houses provide safety, rescue, and care. They get full room and board. It's a full-time Christian school they are a part of. They get private tutoring if they need it. They get medical attention. They get counseling because obviously there's some trauma that they've experienced. They need that. And they have those who will share with them the love of Jesus. Let me give you the phone number. I'm going to share a little audio drop-in of someone who's been affected in this by what's going on in Mumbai and seen the benefit of these safe houses. But I want to let you know that $7.08 a day will provide 1 full day of safety care and rescue. $100 provides 2 weeks of safety care and rescue. $50 will provide a full week. $212 provides about a month. $640, if you can make that available, will provide 3 months of safety care and rescue. $2,560 will provide a complete year of safety care and rescue at one of these safe houses. We've provided 4,419 days of safety care and rescue so far through the first week of the campaign. Encourage you to donate today if you can. Number to call is 877-616-2396, 877-616-2396. Let's listen to this testimony from Mumbai.
My mom said this man was my father, but I'm not sure he is. He was always drunk, and he and my mom would always fight. He would get mad that my mom wasn't making more money. A few times, it got so bad, I would hide under the bed and just cry. Every day, this man would bring men over, and my mom and these men would disappear. I didn't know where they went or what they were doing. My mom knew I wasn't safe. So one day, a social worker from India Partners came and brought me here where I could be safe.
That's a little 6-year-old boy by the name of Krishna, and he experienced himself the safety care and rescue at one of these safe houses run by India Partners. And the project this year, the focus this year, last year, the gifts went toward completing the safe house for the girls, to buy a new and larger safe house for them. This year, in addition to providing continued safety, rescue, and care at the girls' safe house, your gift will help complete the purchase, expansion, and ongoing work of a new boys' safe house. No one, boy or girl, should be bought, sold, or even exposed to living in a red light district, and your gift can help, as Krishna testifies personally. When we come back, we'll dive into some of what's going on with the budget, some of what's going on with the immigration debate. So stay with us. We will get to that just as soon as we get back. We'll talk about the FISA scandal, the FBI stuff with the Mueller investigation, FISA warrants, and all that stuff. We'll try to get you caught up to speed on all of that. You are listening to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point. We'll be right back.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. Did you hear the president at this year's National Prayer Breakfast? It was a great speech, one that should inspire all Americans. Here's some of what he said. Each year, this event reminds us that faith is central to American life and liberty. Our founders invoked our Creator 4 times in the Declaration of Independence. Our currency declares, "In God we trust." And we place our hands on our heart as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance and proclaim that we are one nation under God. Our rights are not given to us by man. Our rights come to us from our Creator. No matter what, no earthly force can take those rights away. That is why the words "Praise be to God" are etched atop the Washington Monument, and those same words are etched into the hearts of our people. So today, we praise God for how truly blessed we are to be American. Across our land, the President said, we see the splendor of our God's creation. Throughout our history, we see the story of God's providence. And in every city and town, we see the Lord's grace all around us through a million acts of kindness, courage, and generosity. We love God. The President continued, all we have to do is open our eyes and look around us, and we can see God's hand. In the courage of our fellow citizens, we see the power of God's love at work in our souls, and the power of God's will to answer all of our prayers. When Americans are able to live by their convictions, to speak openly of their faith, and to teach their children what is right, our families thrive, our communities flourish, and our nation can achieve anything at all. To read the President's full speech, click on the link to it under this broadcast on the SES app. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
afa.net.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. I want to be sure you've got the number for the India Partners Project where you can give. Don't know if I even mentioned it in the last segment. I want to make sure you've got it. That number is 877-616-2396, 877-616-2396. You can also give online at afr.net. Now, as you're aware, we had this budget fiasco in D.C. at the end of last week. The one guy that was the real stalwart on this deal, who stood like a stone wall against this financial insanity, was Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky. He's really the only one that debated against this monstrosity, the only one that spoke against it with any degree of fervor or passion, one of just 28 senators who voted against it. Even Ted Cruz voted for this thing, and I'm still waiting for some understanding. I'm confused. Honestly, I'm very confused about what is going on with Senator Ted Cruz. I would have thought this would have been a no-brainer for him to vote against this thing, and yet he voted for it, found some way to vote for it, and I did not hear an explanation from him. I would love to know what that is. Now, here is Senator Rand Paul. This is a quote, a soundbite we played on Friday, but I want to play it again. It's clip number 1, because what he says here is profoundly true, but unfortunately and profoundly true. Clip number 1.
When the Democrats are in power, Republicans appear to be the conservative party. But when Republicans are in power, it seems there is no conservative party.
That's a pretty profound observation. You know, Rand Paul says the only time that the Republicans are the conservative party is when they have no power. The only time that they sound like conservatives, that they argue like conservatives, that they speak like conservatives, that they vote like conservatives, is when they don't have any power. Then they sound like Ronald Reagan. They sound like Barry Goldwater, all rolled into one. But as soon as they get power, then they start sounding like moderates and liberals and progressives, and all of a sudden, there is no political party in Washington, D.C. And so that's sad but true. We're witnessing it before our very eyes, are we not? Remember, we gave them control of everything. On November 8, 2016, we gave them control of the House, control of the Senate, control of the White House, which is what they said we had to get anything done. Okay, you got it all, got the trifecta. And what happened? We got a budget that's worse than the budgets we used to get under Barack Obama. The deficit under this budget that the Republicans gave to us, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be twice the budget of Obama's budget last year, twice Obama's budget deficit. So that's what that's why Rand Paul says, look, when the Republicans are in power, there simply is no conservative party in Washington. And what they want to call compromise is just the Democrats saying to the Republicans and the Republicans saying to the Democrats, hey, you can spend your money on anything you want. You can spend as much money on anything that you want. And we'll consider that compromise when we give each other a blank check for our various priorities. So that is what's going on in D.C. Now, here's Rand Paul. He was on a talk radio program in New York on Sunday, and he talks about some of the foolish spending that's being done with our money. Let's listen to clip 2.
And give you a quick example of some of the stuff we spend money on. We spent $700,000 last year studying what Neil Armstrong said when he landed on the moon. You remember he said, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind? Well, some idiot in government took $700,000 of taxpayer money and wanted to know whether he said one small step for man or one small step for a man. So that's the kind of stuff your government's spending money on.
So $700,000 to find out whether he used the indefinite article when he took his first step on the moon. Now, as I understand it, I mean, you can go ask Neil Armstrong. Why don't you ask him? And I think he had written it that he would use the indefinite article before the word man, one small step for a man, but he omitted it when he was speaking the words, which I think is a much more majestic way to put it, one small step for man, a giant leap for mankind. That's the way it should have been put. And so he accidentally left out the indefinite article. We don't need $700,000 to figure that out, but that's what happens when you've got the kind of boondoggle budget that these guys approve.
You know what? After spending that $700,000, they came away from the study inconclusive. They couldn't even decide it.
Yeah. Oh, man. So, you know, Rand Paul talks about the idiot that took that money. Well, what about the idiots that gave it to him? That's where the real problem lies. Now, here is Mark Meadows, clip number 3. He's on CBS's Face the Nation on Sunday morning. Mark Meadows is the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, and here's what he had to say about this debacle. Clip 3.
I can tell you the real problem with this particular one is that our leadership caved, the swamp won, and the American taxpayer lost. Our original play was to make sure that we funded the military, we kept other spending flat. That's what we passed, and yet what we got put on the House floor just a few hours later was this unbelievable budget deal that spent American taxpayer dollars.
So what Mark Meadows, I mean, that's a very poignant way to put it, and pungent. Our leadership caved, the swamp won, and the American taxpayer lost. That's a summary of what happened in that budget vote. The leadership caved, the swamp won, the American taxpayer lost. And Mark Meadows said, look, our caucus, the Republican caucus, we had a whole deal that we'd agreed to. And the deal that we agreed to, let's give more money to the military. We hear those that are arguing that we need to provide more funding for the military to make sure they're adequately equipped for every military challenge that faces us as a nation. So we're going to give them more money, but we're going to hold the rest of the spending in the federal government flat. And then when this budget shows up, it's got like between $100 and $200 billion of spending beyond what they'd agreed on. Just shows up on the House floor. It's kind of a take it or leave it. No amendments. Just shows up. You got to take it or leave it. Got to vote for the whole thing, up or down. So that's why it was just such a debacle. Now, clip number 4. This is Representative Jim Jordan. He's also in the House Freedom Caucus, speaking here with Chris Wallace of Fox News about House Speaker Paul Ryan.
Here's what I know. Spending bills start in the House of Representatives. The person most responsible for this spending bill is the Speaker of the House. He could have stood firm for the position that we passed earlier in the week, the position that our conference then supported. I wish he would have done that. So do I think the Speaker has problems? Yes, I do, particularly now as we head into this big immigration debate. Just a few years ago, he was viewed as the leader of fiscal responsibility in our party, and now he presides over a bill that increases spending $300 billion, a $1 trillion deficit. When we were so poised to win this fight, I think there are big concerns because he just presided over the biggest spending increases in the history of this country at a time when we were elected to do just the opposite.
So that's Jim Jordan, and you can sense a little bit of the energy in his voice. And he says the same thing that Mark Meadows said. Look, we agreed to all of this. We agreed that the spending priorities would be to provide some increase for the military and hold all their other spending flat. And so Paul Ryan also caved. Wasn't just the entire leadership, but Paul Ryan, the speaker, caved. So the speaker caved, the leadership caved, the swamp won, and the American taxpayer lost. That is the bottom line. Now, some of the dreamers even are kind of upset with the Democrats, interestingly enough. Here's a dreamer who claims that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are simply using them as pawns. This is from Free Beacon. An immigrant who was brought to the U.S. illegally as a child castigated Democrats, particularly Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi over the weekend for using dreamers like him as political pawns. Hilario Yanez, a recipient of the Deferred Action for Illegal Arrivals Childhood Arrivals Program, praised President Donald Trump's stance on illegal immigration and blasted that of congressional Democrats and, by implication, the congressional Republicans that are going along with what the Democrats want. So apparently Republicans think, well, we got to go along with them or the immigrants are going to castigate us. They're going to criticize us. They're going to condemn us. Well, it might be the other way around. Here's a dreamer that's castigating the people that want open borders. He likes what Donald Trump wants. He wants secure borders. Now, this Yanez is able to receive a work permit as a DACA recipient. He became the first person in his family to graduate from college. Along the way, he interned at a Fortune 500 company, Chevron, I think it was, maybe more than one. And over the weekend, he denounced the Democrats for lacking a clear vision for immigration reform. He says Pelosi and Schumer have no clear message. At the end of the day, I think they have been using us as pawns. You know, and I think this is exactly right, that for the Democrats, the illegal immigrants, the whole immigration issue, especially Hispanics, they're just useful tools to them. They don't really care about them. They don't really have a lot of compassion for them. What they look at them as is useful tools to advance their agenda. They look at them as potential Democratic votes. That's why they're interested in them. That's why they want to develop programs. They're not interested in them fulfilling the American dream. They're interested in them becoming Democrat voters. And so they'll develop all kinds of welfare programs so they can take credit for being the ones that showed all this mercy and compassion for these dreamers. And this Hilario Yanez says they're just taking us for granted. They are just using us. You know, and he pointed out that in the 111th Congress, this is back in the heyday of Barack Obama, the Democratic Party controlled both chambers and the White House. And they had strong majorities in both the House and the Senate, but they chose not to act on immigration at all. They prioritized health care and the economy. They could have done anything they wanted with immigration, and they didn't do a single solitary thing. So Yanez says, at this point, I am quite frustrated with Democrat leadership, which I think ought to be a wake-up call to the Republicans. Hey, maybe this thing isn't going to work out like you think. You think that by caving on immigration, you're going to make some inroads into the Hispanic community. Well, Hilario Yanez has a slightly different take on all of that. We'll be back with your phone calls on the immigration issue and the budget. What do you think? 888-589-8840.
Women and men alike find themselves in despair after an abortion. Every woman who had an abortion was for a short time a mother, every man a father. But afterwards, they're all people in pain, anger, sadness, relationship problems. These often accompany an abortion. But there is hope. Call 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who has already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. And you know, there's almost nothing as wholesome and basic to American culture as a good cup of coffee. Choose from morning blend, evening blend, and everything in between. Get your American Family Coffee and support the American Family Association at afastore.net.
Preborn is saving babies' lives.
My name is Omaris, and I was 19 when I found out I was pregnant. I felt that if I brought a child to this planet, that I could not take care of it, and I could not be mentally prepared to handle everything that comes with having a child. So I thought my best option was to have an abortion. And once I came to have my ultrasound and I heard his heartbeat, I could not have an abortion.
The Ministry of Preborn saves babies' lives through ultrasounds. When a mother hears her baby's heartbeat on an ultrasound, she'll choose life 80% of the time. To donate and provide for a free ultrasound to help save a baby's life, go to preborn.com or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
American Family Radio.
You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to a brand new edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. You know, and Rand Paul made a statement over the weekend in the budget debate that he was not interested in approving government spending that exceeded revenues by $1 million a minute. And that was the accusation that Rand Paul made, is our government is borrowing $1 million a minute, not spending $1 million a minute, but borrowing that on top of what they're spending. They're borrowing $1 million a minute. And it turns out this is absolutely true. This budget's going to add $320 billion to the federal deficit over the next decade. According to the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, the federal government's spending in 2016 exceeded its revenue by $585 billion. That averages out to $1.1 million. Now, in fiscal year 17, the budget deficit increased to $666 billion. That's up to $1.3 million per minute. And it's projected, the Committee for a Responsible Budget projects that the deficit will expand to $800 billion in fiscal year 2018. That averages out to $1.5 million per minute, right on the way to $2 million a minute, which Rand Paul says that's where it is headed, and it will get there. In fiscal year 19, it could be $2.3 million a minute if the deficit balloons to $1.2 trillion. You know, which again, you know, when Barack Obama was running those trillion-dollar deficits every year, we were scandalized. Mm-hmm. We were outraged. We were pounding on our pots and pans. We were ringing the halls of Congress to complain. And now the Republicans, supposed to be our party, the Tea Party that we put there to get a control, is they're the ones that are doing this to us. All right. The number to call is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Let's go to Dan in Richmond, Virginia. Dan, what's on your mind?
I have great difficulty with my nation's understanding of the term illegal. If I walk in a bank and hand the teller a note and say, give me $10,000, and I walk out of the bank and they arrest me, can I tell them it was just an undocumented withdrawal, or did I rob a bank?
Yeah. Well, you know, you couldn't, and that's kind of the whole point, is this is kind of like a systematic plundering of the American citizens. Where is that money coming from? I mean, the federal government generates no wealth. I mean, the only way they can do anything is go down in the basement and crank out money on their printing machine down there. But all of the wealth that America has is generated by the American people, by American workers, by American jobs, by American businesses. That's where wealth is generated. That's where it's going to come from. So if that debt is ever going to be paid back, it's going to be paid back by regular, old, ordinary Americans going to work every day from 8 to 5. And meanwhile, we are systematically being plundered by our own government. It's just a form, as Frederick Bastiat said, it's just a form of legalized plunder. Somebody takes money from you at gunpoint that they don't have a right to, that's just theft. If a mugger does it in an alley, it's theft. If the government does it to it under color of law, still immoral, still unethical, and it still is theft. All right, 888-589-8840 is the number. Let's go to Justin in Mississippi. Welcome, Justin. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Mr. Fisher.
Howdy.
Look, anybody who wants to challenge what I'm about to say, you can go to usdebtclock.org, usdebtclock.org. The number that I see that we need to be worried about is unfunded liability. This is like all welfare, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, all that. We have a unfunded liability of $112 trillion. That's with a T, $112 trillion. Now, if that doesn't say bankruptcy, I don't know what does.
Yeah. Well, you know, yeah. And see, Justin, you're exactly right. And when the unfunded liability that they're talking about is all of the money that the government is obligated to spend and that they don't have the money to pay for, like Social Security. A lot of that is Social Security obligations. They've got obligations based on people hitting their Social Security years. They have been spending way more than they have been taking in. I mean, there were years when more money was coming into the Social Security coffers than was going out, so they kept boosting benefits. Look at us. We're playing Santa Claus every year. Finally, the number of people entering retirement passed up the people who were working to put into the system. All of a sudden, they started drawing more out than was being paid in, and that's when you start generating these unfunded liabilities that Justin is talking about. $112 trillion, you know, is just simply an unimaginable figure. And, you know, we've seen a number of states go bankrupt. Now, and Illinois went bankrupt with like $6 or $8 billion of unfunded liability. So what's the difference? The difference is the American government has a printing press. That's the only way that they haven't gone bankrupt, is they can just go downstairs and print money. You know, and we saw what happened to Germany at the end of World War I. They started just cranking out money. Inflation went nuts. I mean, inflation in Venezuela is over 4,000%, so it can still happen today. And in Germany, it got to the point where people were loading up their wheelbarrows with wheelbarrows full of money, German marks, just to go down and buy a loaf of bread. That's how bad inflation got. And we're not heading there yet, but eventually, I mean, at some point, and this is Justin's point, at some point, you know, you do run out of other people's money, and you just can't keep stalling the wolf at the door. You know, it's a sobering, you know, our national debt right now is $20 trillion, 6 times that in unfunded, 5 to 6 times that in unfunded liability. That's obligations that the government has that it does not have the money to satisfy. Let's go to Joseph in Corinth. Welcome, Joseph. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
How you doing, Brother Brian?
Good. What's up?
The funny thing about all of this is, you know, I was like you. I went for Ted Cruz for president. And now, as I see how he voted, even how he did with Judge Roy Moore and all of this, and I'm beginning to see why the Lord chose Donald Trump for president, you know, because Ted Cruz he's a mess, you know. And Rand Paul, he's the man, you know, for lack of another word.
Well, and you know, that's what's disappointing, Joseph, is that, you know, Rand Paul and Ted Cruz used to run in tandem on a lot of these issues. They would echo each other. They would make they would come at the issue from a slightly different vantage point. But what they were saying, ideologically, they were right in the same canoe, and they were reinforcing what other people were saying. You know, and Ted Cruz, I don't want to be too hard on him because I just haven't heard from him. I would just like an explanation. Maybe there's some kind of innocent explanation for his disappearance from the political landscape. But in some kind of explanation for some of these votes, I don't see an explanation for, you know, Mark Levin was very definitive. Nobody can call himself a fiscal conservative that voted for this budget. So the only fiscal conservatives in the Senate would be those 28 that voted against this thing, and that doesn't include Ted Cruz. You know, it makes me wonder, Joseph, if maybe Ted Cruz isn't going to run for re-election. Everybody's just been assuming he's been out raising money, but to me, he's not running like a guy, I don't know, that's running for re-election. Looks like these votes kind of set. I don't know. I have no idea what's going on. You have a thought?
Well, I think what it is that no matter what, we have to keep it kind of like a scorecard, you know, because now the pressure's on. Now, if he had become president, the pressure would be even more so. So what would we have seen if he had become president? And God knows all things. He puts the right people in the right position, you know, for his purpose. And the more I look at it, I realize that Ted Cruz would not have been the one.
All right, Joseph, listen, I appreciate your call. And one thing I do know, you know, for all of Donald Trump's faults, and there are many, and I have not been shy about pointing them out, for all of his faults, I think Donald Trump is the only one that could have done what Donald Trump did, because the only way you can do what he did is to have his personality, that kind of take no prisoners, bombastic, tweet a minute, tweet at 4 o'clock in the morning, tweet at 12 o'clock at night, tweet at 2 o'clock in the morning, tweet at 8:30 in the morning, tweet at everybody, take on every one of your enemies, all comers, and punch them right in the nose. Donald Trump's the only one that would do that, and that's what it took to get the things done that Donald Trump got done. All right, let's go to Joe in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Joe, Hot Springs, Arkansas, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hello, Brian. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Great.
Praying for good health for you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that very much. Thanks for listening. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Well, I wanted to get in with Donald Trump a little bit and the White House taking out this big loan against the country. I would say that Donald Trump, the businessman that he is, has always made an investment, and looking for a return on that investment has not come about yet. Unlike the previous administration, who dwindled the money on projects that didn't get done, not to mention the welfare and the handouts that were taking place, all costing money. I believe that Donald Trump, on the investment that he's making, will have a return, and he hasn't been given his chance yet to be looked upon as dealing like the Democrats did.
Well, you know, and you're right, Joe, and the theory is this tax cut package is going to generate so much in revenue that it'll make up for the deficit and we'll start to catch up. That's the theory. Hasn't ever worked yet, but maybe Donald Trump will be the first. Maybe we ought to give him a shot. Well, I don't have any choice but to give him a shot. Thanks, Joe, for the call. We'll be right back after the news. Ben in Houston, if you hang on, I'll take it coming out right out of the news. We'll be right back.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
1milliondads.com is where men can learn and grow together as men of the cross. Close families and even national revival begin at home with strong fathers in the faith. Go to the website, read the articles. You're not alone. 1milliondads.com. Lead, or others will.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. President Trump is meeting with state and local leaders from around the country at the White House to discuss a critical need. The president said they are there to discuss America's crumbling infrastructure.
And one understands, and the people in this room really understand better than most, probably, hopefully better than anybody, that the problem the states have and local leaders have with funding the infrastructure is horrendous. And we will build, we will maintain, and the vast majority of Americans want to see us take care of our infrastructure. Trucking companies are complaining that they used to take trucks from Los Angeles to New York, and there was no damage. Now they bring from Los Angeles to New York, and there's tremendous damage to their trucks because our roads are in bad shape, and we're going to get the roads in great shape.
More details are coming out on that Russian plane crash. Amy Kellogg has the latest.
Emergency workers have found the 2 flight data recorders from the Saratov Airlines flight that crashed near Moscow yesterday. Russian investigators have pretty much ruled out terrorism, but they don't know whether it was pilot error, mechanical failure, or the weather that caused this plane to come down. They are now saying the plane was intact when it crashed. All 71 people on board were killed. The Antonov 148 had been headed to Orsk in the Ural Mountains when it crashed just minutes after taking off. Amy Kellogg, Fox News.
A border wall, chain migration, and DACA. That's all expected to be part of an immigration debate getting underway this week in the Senate.
All that exists right now is a shell of a bill. A vote this evening will set up a Senate process for debating and voting on amendments. The goal is to find proposals that can win 60 votes, expected in the end to provide some pathway to legal status or citizenship for DACA-eligible immigrants, those brought to the country illegally as children. President Trump and many other Republicans also want new limits to legal immigration and billions of dollars for a border wall and other security upgrades. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Last week saw many ups and downs at the stock market, and Dan Celia of Financial Issues said we should expect the same thing for the first part of this week.
Wild, wonderful, crazy, irrational swings, however you want to call it, whatever the way you want to frame it, are probably here at least through the middle of the week.
Celia says reports on inflation are due on Wednesday, along with data on retail sales. Information on industrial production, housing starts, and consumer sentiment will finish out the week. The strange circumstances leading Walgreens to announce a new bathroom policy are leading some people to believe we are moving down a slippery slope. Chris Woodward explains.
Walgreens is now allowing people to use the bathroom of the gender in which they say they identify. The nationwide policy follows an incident last year in which a biological female, who was not transgender, was told at a California Walgreens that she could not use the women's restroom because she looked like a man. 2 months later, the ACLU wrote Walgreens a letter saying California law allows people to use the bathroom of their gender identity. Peter Spigg of the Family Research Council comments.
The strange circumstances of this, in which a person was actually barred from the restroom that corresponded with her biological sex because of her gender expression, her appearance, suggests to me that the lines are becoming so blurred that we are moving down a slippery slope towards the point where anyone will simply be able to use any restroom they want. And it will not be contingent on biological sex or on gender identity or on appearance. People will just be able to use any restroom. That's the only way companies like this can avoid being accused of discrimination in the current climate.
Sprigg adds that the problem with that is we will then completely remove the protection for privacy and safety of women that has historically been in place because of the separation of men's and women's facilities.
I'm concerned that is the direction in which our culture is moving.
I'm Chris Woodward.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman.
So who is responsible for the dysfunction in Washington? That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
When the Democrats are in power, Republicans appear to be the conservative party. But when Republicans are in power, it seems there is no conservative party.
The swamp won and the American taxpayer lost.
The hypocrisy hangs in the air and chokes anyone with a sense of decency.
Our leadership caved, the swamp won, and the American taxpayer lost.
Spending bills start in the House of Representatives.
You don't have to spend all of this money. These are spending caps.
Donald Trump doesn't care about debt and deficit. He never has. He said, I'm the king of debt. I love debt.
We spent $700,000 last year studying what Neil Armstrong said when he landed on the moon.
The White House did not deny the release of the Democrats' memo. What they did is they said, look, you need to make some redactions and some technical corrections here, and we will get it out right away.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation. Got another caller on the line that's been waiting patiently. Let's start the hour. Well, let's see. I don't think we've got Ben on the line, it doesn't look like. So, Ben, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to bring you in. Doesn't look like we've got you tapped into the system. So, sorry about that, Ben. Our apologies.
You want me to run in the other room? See if
well, see if you can. Yeah, see if we can grab Ben before we lose him completely. So hang on, Ben. We'll try to. What's that?
I need to get this music faded out.
Okay, all right. And then Jeff will go in there and see if we can redeem the call from Ben. A couple of notes from the Supreme Court. The liberals have mobilized against Donald Trump's first nominee for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. This is the most liberal court of appeals in the country. It's the most reversed court of appeals. It's been reversed. Cases that have gone up to the Supreme Court from the Ninth Circuit, it has been reversed more often than any other circuit court of appeals. And so Donald Trump is appointing a conservative, which you'd think ought to provide some kind of ideological balance to this court. And the liberals have mobilized en masse against this guy just because he is an ideological conservative. They don't like some of the things that he wrote as an undergraduate. They've gone back into his undergraduate career as a student and to find things to criticize. He was criticizing race-focused groups, saying they're not good for diversity. They emphasize differences rather than the things that we share in common. It just promotes race think, which is exactly right. And so they're dinging him for that, trying to keep him from being nominated. Now, keep that in your mind. They're going to try to drum him out because of this ideological thing. Okay, I guess we're not going to be able to get Ben back. Sorry about that, Ben. Our apologies. I don't know if I do.
Actually, he hung up.
Oh, okay.
What it is.
So we lost him. That's our bad, Ben. Sorry about that. Now, think about that when you get ready to process what I'm going to tell you about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, she was speaking at a Columbia University women's conference on Sunday, and she was asked to clarify a comment she'd made in September of 2016 on PBS, where she said in 2016 on PBS that sexism was, quote, no doubt one of the reasons Clinton lost to Trump. She said she still believed that sexism interfered with the election, adding that no man could have possibly been criticized the way that Clinton was. Quote, I think it was difficult for Hillary Clinton to get by even the macho atmosphere prevailing during the campaign. She was criticized in a way that I think no man would have been criticized. I think anyone who watched that campaign unfold would answer it the same way I did. Yes, sexism played a prominent part. Well, using the same standard that they used to go after this Ryan Bounds, Trump's nominee to the Ninth Circuit, you'd have to say that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is not qualified to sit on the Supreme Court. Because after all, if Ryan Bounds is not impartial, how can you say that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is impartial on issues that deal with the relationship between the sexes? She's obviously got a sexist view herself. So she ought to be disqualified, but you don't hear a peep from people on the left about her bias and her prejudice, but they are going to excoriate Ryan Bounds until they keep him off of the federal bench. By the way, back on the immigration thing just for a moment, ICE arrests, that's Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE arrests are up. I have hit a 3-year high under Donald Trump. They declined precipitously since 2009. Wonder what happened in 2009. Oh, yeah. Barack Obama became president, and ICE arrests declined precipitously, but they rose 30% during Donald Trump's first full year, according to analysis released Thursday by the Pew Research Center. Highest number of arrests in 3 years in fiscal year 2017. Between Inauguration Day on January 20 and the end of the fiscal year on September 30th, ICE made 42% more arrests than it did over the same period in fiscal year 2016. ICE arrests fell continuously over the course of President Barack Obama's administration and jumped, I mean, right out of the chute. They jumped once Donald Trump took the helm. I don't know if you heard this story. It's a really sad story, a cautionary tale, I assume. This couple, you might have heard about this. This couple decided they just wanted to get away from it all, young couple. They sold everything that they owned. Everything that they had, they pooled. They sold their house, they sold their possessions, they sold their cars, and they bought a boat, sailboat, and they were going to go on a once-in-a-lifetime adventure and sail around the world. That's what they were going to do. They even had their pet pug dog along with them. What happened is they were 2 days out of port, and their boat hit a sandbar, and it sunk. And everything that they owned went to the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. And that boat represented everything that they owned. Everything that they possessed, they had sunk, now literally, into that boat. So they were going to escape modern life on the sailboat. They lived in Breckenridge, Colorado. People that have lived there would say, why would you want to get away from Breckenridge, Colorado?
Oh, it's gorgeous.
You know, it's gorgeous there. Yeah, absolutely. So they've got no jobs now, no savings, and no place to go. By the way, we had Opie Hurst on last week to talk about his ministry in Cuba and how they're ministering to college students over there. He invited you to participate with them in scholarshiping college students to go to this 3-day conference, and you responded overwhelmingly. He was really moved and really pleased at your generosity, and so they're going to be able to provide a number of places for interested college students in Cuba to get education, to get some training in apologetics, and to get some strengthening in their relationship with God. So thank you for your generosity. Now, a couple of things on the subject of race I want to touch on today. You might have seen this story. There's a student who he was an Asian student, wasn't a white student, he was an Asian student, and his college project was to study the connection between IQ and race. And there have been a number of very serious scholarly studies that have made a connection with the results of IQ. These are just IQ tests, like you'd have math tests or vocabulary tests, that have drawn correlation between certain races and IQ levels. And again, that's just objective information. Nobody's skewing it. Nobody's tilting the scales. So it's objective information, but it's done, the breakdown's done by race. And so people are scandalized by this, even though really it's fundamentally no different than testing people for vocabulary, testing people for math, and that kind of thing. But there was so much outcry, so much resistance against this project that it had to be pulled down after just a couple of days. You know, I got a column I'll lead off when we come back about how when people play the race card too quickly, it diminishes the whole topic. Accusing somebody of being a racist ought to be a very, very serious accusation. When it's thrown around, it diminishes it. Back in 2.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute. Republicans want to stabilize Obamacare by paying off the powerful health plan cartel the law created. They're not trying to repeal the law, they're trying to save it. That's what stabilize means. It's also a deceptive shell game. Health plans threaten to raise premiums unless Congress pays them billions to lower premiums. In short, health plans want Congress to take more from your back pocket in taxes, so some of you can pay less from your front pocket in premiums. This bad Obamacare idea is called reinsurance. Tell Congress to stop the shell game. Tell them to repeal Obamacare, not stabilize it.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Hey, my name's Brant. You ever make a change and then wonder, why didn't I do this a long time ago? That's what's happening for thousands of people with regard to their health care. They're joining MediShare, and then they're wondering, why didn't I already do this? For most members, it costs less than half what they were paying for their old health plan. There's a huge provider network, too. You can customize your plan, and this is awesome. MediShare members can go online with the doctor 24/7. So if you need a prescription for the flu or something, it's so convenient for you and your family. So yeah, this is one of those why did I wait on this things. And if you don't love your current health plan, you're not stuck with it. You can join MediShare anytime. By the way, to give you an idea, the typical savings for a family, about $500 a month. It just makes so much sense. Check it out. They're super easy to talk to. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Here's a little news item. The Roman Colosseum, along with two churches in Mosul and Aleppo, will be lit up by red lights later this month to draw attention to the global persecution of Christians. When's the last time something like that has happened?
Yeah.
Christians are the victims of at least 75% of all religiously motivated violence and oppression, declared the latest report from the Aid to the Church in Need, the group that is organizing the event. So the Colosseum will be lit up in red to commemorate that and to remind people what's going on there. You know, and I mentioned this column, it's a National Review online, about overused cries of racism. Let me give you an example of just how silly this kind of stuff can get. You know, there's a new movie, Peter Rabbit movie that's out, and he's been accused. Peter Rabbit has been accused of being racist and being a bully because it has a joke about Farmer McGregor having a blackberry allergy.
What?
And Peter Rabbit and his friends, they throw blackberries at Farmer McGregor because they know about his allergies. So now Peter Rabbit is on the hook for being a bully. And some group said that food allergies are a serious issue. The movie should not have made light of the issue, even in a cartoonish, slapstick way. So, you know, it's interesting. You start thinking about, because it's a depiction of a dangerous activity. That's why it's bullying. You start thinking about the Roadrunner.
The Tom and Jerry.
Tom and Jerry. Think about Bugs Bunny. You think about Daffy Duck. I mean, all of those are going to have to be banned. Have to be taken out in a pile and burned. That's just getting absurd. And two items along this line that I want to talk about. One has to do with hate crimes, and the other with this overused accusation of racism. This is a column in National Review Online. You know, you had this speed skater at the Olympics, and he refused to attend the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. He's a black speed skater, and it was down to between him and a white female skater who was going to represent the United States at the opening ceremony. So they both were tied, whatever metrics they used to pick someone, they were tied. So how do you break a tie in American politics? You use a coin flip, or you draw something out of a hat, or you use a coin toss. That's how the apostles did it. Remember when Judas and Matthias tied among the apostles to be the replacement for Judas Iscariot? They basically drew lots. That's the same as flipping a coin to make that decision. So that's a time-honored way to break a tie. You just trust God with the result. You know, Proverbs says that every toss of the coin in the lap is from the Lord. So you can use that. Just trust God to determine the outcome. Well, what happens, but this skater, so they used a coin toss to decide who was going to become the flag bearer for the opening ceremony, and the white female skater won the coin toss. And the black athlete was outraged. He was incensed. He was insulted. This was racism, and he stayed out of the opening ceremony altogether. And so this writer of this column says, look, and there was another guy that got in trouble. The Fox News Vice President John Moody was writing about the diversity of the Olympic team, and people are complaining that only 4% of the Olympic team is black, while 13% of the general population is African American. Only 4% of the American Winter Olympic team is African American, but failed to mention that in the last Summer Olympics, even though African Americans are 13% of the population, 23% of the Summer Olympic team was African Americans. They were overrepresented in the Summer Olympic team. And he said, look, in the Olympics, this is what John Moody, the vice president of Fox News, said, in the Olympics, let's focus on the winner of the race, not the race of the winner, which, of course, is exactly right. You know, you want to pick the members of your Olympic team based on who is the best athlete. Skin color should not have anything whatsoever to do with it. Should be completely irrelevant. You want the fastest and the highest and the strongest to represent your nation in the Olympics, and skin color ought to be the least of the qualifications of the factors that count. Well, he just got hammered for this. I think they might have even had to pull down his column. I think they pulled down his column, yeah. They removed it. Fox News said the column does not reflect the views or values of Fox News. And this columnist makes the point, look, when you overuse the racism label, you throw it around, make accusations where it doesn't really fit, you don't have any demonstrated racism. Like, for instance, it's bandied about with Donald Trump. I've never seen one evidence of racism on Donald Trump's part. Now, he will profile based on behavior, especially criminal behavior, but that's not racism. That's a profile based on criminal behavior. It's based on behavior, nothing to do with race. So I haven't seen any evidence that Donald Trump is a racist, but he's constantly accused of this. And the point is, if you use it where it doesn't fit, then it devalues that, and it winds up hurting people who are victims of genuine racism. And because everybody's a racist, everybody's accused of racism, then when it actually happens, you don't give it the weight that it deserves, which is not fair to people who are genuine victims of racism.
And Brian, I'm sorry, just the question on this, the skater that's claiming that, what is he claiming is racist? The coin?
Well, he'd have to be saying that the coin toss is racist, that the coin was racist, I guess.
I don't know. I don't understand that.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
You know, and so nobody can figure that out. And even Mark Lamont Hill. I don't know if you know who Mark Lamont Hill is. He is a commentator. He's pretty radical, pretty extremist when it comes to the race issues. In fact, he got bounced off of one network because he was just too extremist on his comments about race. Shows up on MSNBC all the time. Very articulate guy. Mark Lamont Hill is professor at Temple University, and he said this. He told Philadelphia Magazine, "It's very rare that I call someone a racist. It has to be so unambiguous, like some white supremacist leader. I just don't find the term productive. It cripples the conversation. No one wants to discuss the matter with you after you use the word. It's a guy named John Bunzel, a Democrat, served on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. He said we should end the, quote, corrupted usage, end quote, of the word racist. It breeds bitterness and polarization, not a spirit of pragmatic reasonableness in confronting our difficult problems. So, crying racism in today's political theater, the dictionary definition of race is somewhere in this column. The dictionary just says it's preferring people, thinking people are superior based on their race. So if somebody is not thinking of people as superior because of the color of their skin, then it's not racism. And we shouldn't be bandying that about frivolously as we tend to do. Now, one other column that I came across has to do with hate crimes. And we've been dealing with hate crimes in our culture for some time now. And I've said from the very beginning, look, every crime is a hate crime. It involves some kind of animus toward another human being. We don't need to break it down by race and all that. And if it is a race-motivated hate crime, you still focus on the crime. You punish them for the crime. And if you punish people for the crimes, then those who commit hate crimes are going to get punished right along with everybody else who is a bad actor. This is a column by Edward Olive on dailycaller.com. He says, in fact, this is the fact. Anyone opposed to any bill called a hate crimes bill should prepare to be accused of bigotry, racism, and the like. However, he says, no matter what you call it, hate is a horrible thing. We need less of it, but is it something we should legislate? Hate is an emotion, a belief, a thought. Although we can agree that hate is wrong and should be roundly discouraged, it has not been our nation's practice to criminalize thought. And I think he's right about this. Our Constitution protects the right of people to think, believe, and generally speak without fear of prosecution. And when we start throwing around hate crimes, especially for different categories such as race or whatever, you start intruding on what is taking place in people's minds and criminalizing not their behavior, not their actions, but criminalizing their thoughts. And the law ought to be reserved for wrongful conduct, not the motive, but the conduct. You may explore motive in certain crimes because it helps establish the crime and it helps establish that a crime has been committed because you want to know why the person did what they did. But what draws the attention of the law to that person is not his motive, because if he has the same motive and doesn't do anything, who's going to know? You don't prosecute somebody for what their motive might have been or what their thoughts were going through their minds. You prosecute them for their conduct. So our laws ought to be to prohibit doing something that's bad. They should not prohibit thinking something that is bad. So hate crimes legislation that focuses on criminalizing hateful belief, speech, or thought would be inconsistent with existing standards for establishing criminal behavior, which ought to be the focus of the law. And that's what Thomas Jefferson said, is the law should extend only to actions and not to beliefs. Now, again, there's a lot of actions that can be motivated by hate. You can attack somebody. You can light a fire to their house. You can burn a cross on their lawn. You can throw Molotov cocktails through their windows. All of those are behaviors, criminal conduct, and individuals who do that ought to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. But you're prosecuting them not for what they were thinking when they did it, but for what they did. This is what the writer says: if it is appropriate to prohibit hateful conduct aimed at any group, then it is appropriate to prohibit hateful conduct aimed at all groups. If we are to criminalize hateful conduct, we cannot criminalize hateful conduct against some and not others.
8 Days of Hope has been around for 12 and a half years, and never did we expect to see a storm wreak havoc in a state like we did with Hurricane Harvey. This past year, for 7 weeks, 8 Days of Hope volunteers from around the world poured into Southeast Houston as we helped out thousands of families, gutting their houses, drying them out, treating them for mold, bringing them food, bringing them supplies, and now we're going back. That's where you and I get a chance to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and we want to invite you, your family, your loved ones, people that you hang out with, people you work with. 8 Days of Hope, 14, and our first ever back-to-back trip. That's right, 8 Days of Hope, 14 and 15, Southeast Houston from March 10th to March 24th. We're looking for skilled professionals, people who know how to work with their hands, and maybe they do this for a living. We're also looking for people that are less skilled, but are still looking to be a part of something way bigger than just themselves. Go to 8daysofhope.com for more information, 8daysofhope.com. Come be a part of the largest rebuilding trip ever planned by 8 Days of Hope.
Every day in the red light districts of Mumbai, India, there are children as young as 8 being trafficked and exploited. And it isn't just young girls they're looking for. Some men are looking for young boys. This cannot go on any longer. Team up with American Family Radio and India Partners. With your gift of just $7.08, you provide a day of safety and shelter at a new India Partners safe house far away from the city. That $7.08 means school, shelter, meals, and the love of Jesus. Coming up here on American Family Radio, we're going to address the issue of child trafficking, but we aren't going to do it in a way that is graphic or unsafe for your children to hear. But we will tell you now that we're going to address a topic that could, for some, be uncomfortable. We hope you'll listen and team up with American Family Radio and India Partners to provide hope for a new safe house for boys in the red light district. Get more information at afr.net.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Good to have you in the conversation today. Let us go pick up some sound bites here. This goes back to the whole budget deal. Mick Mulvaney is President Trump's director of the Office of Management and Budget. So he's the numbers guy. Now, Mick Mulvaney was a Freedom Caucus guy when he was still in Congress. Donald Trump plucked him from Congress to be his OMB director. Mick Mulvaney was the Jim Jordan type. He was a Mark Meadows type, very conservative fiscally when he was in Congress. And that's why Donald Trump picked him to be his Office of Management Budget. But now he's just signed off as Donald Trump's representative on this budget, which is going to leave over $1 trillion deficit next year. So he's on with Chris Wallace, and Chris Wallace has a good question for him. Clip number 5.
During your confirmation hearing for this job back in January of 2017, you criticized the Obama presidency for overspending. But under this new plan, with the new spending, deficit will rise from $439 billion in 2015 under Obama to a projected $1.2 trillion in 2019 and trillion-dollar deficits for the years after that.
What we're doing is this, is saying, look, you don't have to spend all of this money. These are spending caps. You don't have to spend all that. So we're going to show how you could run the government without spending all of that.
You know.
And that will be our 2019 budget. But if you are going to spend it, which is exactly what we think Congress is going to do, here's how you should spend it. And that will be our 2018 budget. So take the money that the Democrats want to put to these social programs and move it to things like infrastructure, move it to things like opioid relief, move it to things that are in line with the president's priorities, so that if it does get spent, at least it gets spent in the right places.
You know, I don't know who's going to take Mick Mulvaney. You know, I frankly think the guy is embarrassing himself here because he says, look, we don't have to pretend that we're going to spend all this money because all this tells Congress is the maximum amount of money they can spend, but they don't have to spend it all. And we're going to tell them, but if they are going to spend it all, then we're going to tell them how to spend it. We'll prioritize it for them. So I don't know. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Have you ever given your kids money to buy, say, mom a Christmas present and said, well, don't spend it all?
Yeah. Or now you don't have to spend it all.
Yeah.
See how well that works. So I don't know. That's Mick Mulvaney. So he's admitting, look, if you're going to spend it, which is exactly what we think Congress is going to do, we think they're going to spend everything that we put in this budget. They don't have to. That's just a ceiling. But we do think, but we're going to tell them how to spend it. We're going to prioritize it for them. Well, Nancy Pelosi is out here. She's given the marching orders to her Democrats to fight anything that Donald Trump and the Republicans put forward. Doesn't matter what it is. I mean, the order went out. Whatever they're for, we're against. We don't have to look at it. We don't have to evaluate it. We don't have to see what it's like on its merits. We don't have to do any of that. If Trump is for it and the Republicans are for it, then we are, by definition, we are against it. Now, here is Chris Cillizza, clip number 6. He's an editor for CNN. And here's his observation about this budget.
It shows the fact that this is 100% Donald Trump's party. Donald Trump doesn't care about debt and deficit. He never has. He said, I'm the king of debt. I love debt. When he wins, he conducts a hostile takeover of the Republican Party in the 2016 election, and they have capitulated to him.
You know, and I believe Chris Cillizza is right about this, that Donald Trump has never even pretended to be a fiscal conservative. You never hear Donald Trump talking about the deficit. You never hear him talk about spending that's out of control. You never hear him complaining about the debt, because he referred himself, as Chris Cillizza points out, as the king of debt. As far as Donald Trump is concerned, debt is one of the useful tools that you have at your disposal when you're taking on a project. You've got a big project, you borrow money to complete the project. The project then starts making money, and you can pay off your creditors. For Donald Trump, debt's not a bad thing. That's how you get things done. And so for him, having this huge debt is not a big deal. He's run his whole life with heavy debt load, and that's how he's gotten to where he's at. Now, Nunez, what is Nunez's first name? Is it Ralph Nunez? The House guy? I should have written his first name down here, but I didn't. Anyway, Nunez is the guy that's been the voice of reason on this FISA surveillance memos. He's the guy that exposed the fact that this Steele dossier, completely unverified, salacious, not one thing in it that the FBI could confirm, that it was the basis for the surveillance authorization, the surveillance warrants that put Donald Trump and members of his campaign team under surveillance.
Devin
Nunez. Now, the Democrats prepared their own memo in response to the Nunez-Gowdy memo, and Donald Trump wouldn't release it. And it was very predictable. The Democrats are out there claiming that there's stuff here he doesn't want you to see. Again, he's not being transparent. They're trying to hide stuff from you. There's stuff in this memo they're afraid that you'll find out about. They don't want you to see it. The reality was they deliberately loaded this thing up with improvised explosive devices. They put things in there that they knew represented classified information that would have to be redacted before the memo could be released to the public. And they knew when Trump looked at this and had his eyes on it and the eyes of his team, they were going to say, look, we can't release this as it is. It's going to have to be sent back to the House committee for all of this sensitive information, this classified information, to be redacted. It's going to have to be pulled out of there before it can be released. Here's what Devin Nunez said, clip 7.
It was clear from the development of the Democratic memo from the very beginning that they packed it full of sources and methods. Now, for the viewers out there, what are sources and methods? We don't want to give up the way that our intelligence committee recruits sources, the methods that they may use to recruit sources. So these are things that don't need to be made public. However, the Democrats knew this. They packed their memo full of sources and methods. Now, on Friday night, we received a letter back from the White House. The White House did not deny the release of the Democrats' memo. What they did is they said, look, you need to make some redactions and some technical corrections here, and we will get it out right away. Now, from that point, we've heard nothing but crickets. The Democrats have been on TV all weekend long. Their memo is sitting at the House Intelligence Committee down at the bottom of the Capitol, waiting to be redacted. If they really wanted to get it out, they'd be down there all day yesterday, redacting it, getting it back over to the White House so that the public could know what's in it.
All right, so Devin Nunes said, look, they've had all weekend. If they really want this thing released, and he suspects that they don't, and I think Nunes is right about that, they really don't. They're trying to use this as a political ploy, but they actually do not want their memo to be released to the public. Nunes said, look, if they wanted to, they could have spent all weekend getting rid of the portions, redacting the portions that need to be cleared up, and then it could be released. Nunes says, in contrast to the Democrats, we actually want their memo to be released to the public. Clip 8.
Well, right. We actually want the Democratic memo out. We think it's ridiculous on the face of it. We think it's very political about how they attack myself. They attack Chairman Gowdy. They turn Carter Page into some super secret Russian spy. They talk about how Christopher Steele is a really, really good source when we know that he lied to the FBI. So we want this out. We don't know why they're not in this weekend redacting it so that we can get it back to the White House so the president can declassify it.
So we said, look, we'd like the American people to have this information. We want them to be able to look at all the points of view and be able to make up their own mind about the surveillance warrant. Now, here is clip number 3. Again, Devin Nunes.
We very simply said, look, the court didn't know that the Democrats paid for this. Now, remember, this is an investigation into the other campaign. I would think a judge would need to know that. They also omitted the fact, after they discovered that Christopher Steele went and talked to multiple media outlets, and that they had used some of those media outlets, some of the stories, to corroborate the dossier, you would think somehow, someone, somewhere would say, hey, we better go tell the FISA court this. They didn't do it the first time. They didn't do it the second time. They didn't do it the third time. In fact, they didn't even do it the fourth time. So a full year, they were spying on an American citizen who was affiliated with the Trump campaign, and the court didn't know any of that for 4 times in a row.
So Devin Nunes said, look, there's stuff that this FISA court should have known before they made their decision, and we know for a fact they did not know these facts. They did not know, for instance, that the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign paid for this dossier. They didn't know that. They weren't informed of that this was just campaign propaganda. This was a piece of campaign literature, campaign propaganda. It was presented to them as if it was a verified FBI dossier. You know, and James Comey said the next summer they used this dossier in October of 2016 to get a surveillance warrant against Donald Trump and his team. But James Comey said in July of 2017 that it's unverified and salacious. Well, if it's unverified and salacious in 2017, it was in October of 2016. But the court did not know anything about that. And also, they did not know that Steele had been fired by the FBI as an unreliable informant because he was blabbing to the media. One of the strict rules for an informant is you don't go talking to the media. The information you gather, that is for us and for us alone. We can't protect you, can't protect your identity and all that if you start going and blabbing to the media. Well, that's exactly what Christopher Steele did. He went out and started talking to the media. And the FBI had to fire him for that, made him unreliable because he promised them, as a condition of serving as a confidential informant, he promised them that he wouldn't breathe a word of what he found to anybody. Well, the court didn't know that either, that he had been released from his duties by the FBI as an unreliable informant. So these are things that the court simply did not know. I got a lengthy piece by Andy McCarthy about Lisa Page's text, the one that said Obama wants to know everything that we're up to. And he says, look, that was actually okay because that investigation was a counterintelligence investigation, and it's entirely appropriate for the president to be informed of everything that goes on in a counterintelligence investigation. Nothing improper about it. We'll be right back with your call.
Does God exist? Is the Bible true? Does truth exist?
When people say there is no truth, I simply ask them this question. Is that true?
Join us this weekend for Cross-Examined with Frank Turek, author of the bestseller, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist.
I actually think it takes more faith not to believe in the truthfulness of the Bible than it does to believe in the Bible.
Cross-Examined with apologist Frank Turek, Saturday morning at 9 Central and Sunday afternoon at 4 Central on American Family Radio.
The book of Revelation is the greatest manual for what it means to be an overcoming Christian you will ever find. If you want to be victorious and get in on the victory that Christ has already wrought at the cross, the book of Revelation outlines various steps for those who will overcome.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Escape the Coming Night, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
If you like trips where you have to plan everything, then maybe our tour is not for you. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman with American Family Association and American Family Radio. Of course, I'm talking about our spiritual heritage tours of Washington, D.C., Mount Vernon, and then a separate trip to Williamsburg, Virginia. And guess what? We take care of everything. All you have to do is, as they say, show up. But we take these spiritual heritage tours twice a year, once in June and once in September. Stephen McDowell of the Providence Foundation, who is a historian, will be joining us for both tours, and he will tell you everything you need to know about the places, the times, the events that we will experience on these tours of Washington, D.C. and Williamsburg. For all the information, just go to the website spiritualheritagetours.com. That's spiritualheritagetours.com for everything.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Focal Point. Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Number to call. We'll talk about anything we've talked about on the program today. Anything you want to comment on, ask a question about. You can comment on anything we've talked about on the program today. 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840 is the number to call. 888-589-8840. Just want to make one comment. We've heard earlier to IQ test. That's an academic exercise. And one of the things that we have learned about learning, and again, education can improve IQ. The harder you work at your homework, it can sharpen, add points to your IQ. And one of the things that we know is that the home environment makes a tremendous difference in an individual developing his intellectual capacities. And that can explain some of the differences on these tests without having to be imputed to one race being inferior to another. Doesn't have to mean that. Some demographic segments of culture, like for instance, in the Asian community, they place a very high premium on education. That's in the Asian community, very high premium education. So there's a lot of emphasis in their homes as they grow up on being good students, doing their homework, excelling in their education. That's why so many of them qualify to get into elite Ivy League schools. Also, the divorce rate, the out-of-wedlock birth rate in the Asian community is about 20%. And the divorce rate among the Asian community is very, very low compared to the Caucasian community and any other community. So their rates of out-of-wedlock births are lower than the white community, and their divorce rates are lower than the white community. So it's no surprise that their IQ scores would be higher than the IQ scores in the white community, because it has something to do with the values that they grow up with and the emphasis they place in developing their mental capacity. No big mystery there. Security of the home life in which somebody grows up, that can have a lot to do with the full developing of their academic and intellectual potential. Now, one quick soundbite I want to play before we go to the phones is Peggy Noonan, Wall Street Journal. This is something we've talked about on this program a lot. You know, we've got a lot of concern about voter fraud We've had examples of voter fraud. And Peggy Noonan here says something that I believe is exactly right. I think we've got to go this direction to make sure we don't have voter fraud. You know, the Russians did try to intervene in the election in 2016 by getting into voter systems, getting into registration rolls and stuff like that. And perhaps they were able to hack into some. We know that they made other efforts that were not successful, but they tried. So how do you prevent voter fraud from happening? Well, Peggy Noonan says, here's what you got to do, clip 10.
Here's my big concern. We are, as we all know, a deeply divided country. We have these partisan fights. They're very rough and tough. This side watches this, the other side watches not the same information flow. One thing that could damage this nation terribly is having a national election where the outcome is unclear because we got hacked. The states is a national election. By the year 2020, right away, we should start saying, you got to go paper ballots. We'll figure out all this internet magic technological stuff, but for now, paper ballots in America so Ohio knows how it voted.
You know, one of the reasons that paper ballots are a protection against an election being rigged online is that none of the voting machines in a paper ballot system are connected to the internet. They're not even connected to the internet. So the votes are registered on a paper ballot, they're collected in a safe box, and then they're delivered to the place where they are counted. There's no opportunity even to monkey with the thing online. A couple of quick environmental items that I got to get to you. These just crack me up. You know, everybody's talking about global warming, catastrophic global warming. Wind, ice, and cold. Here's a headline from Yahoo. Wind, ice, and cold are making this Olympics too wintry. Wind and ice pellets left Olympic snowboarders simply trying to stay upright in conditions that many felt were unfit for competition. The best ski jumpers on the planet dealing with swirling gusts and by athletes trying to shoot straight. Low temperatures have hovered in the single digits, dropping below 0 Fahrenheit, with unforgiving gusts whipping to 45 miles per hour. And then you also have this story about billionaires and athletes freezing as winter smacks the Olympics. Record snowfall amounts pile up around the globe. Spain getting record snow. Michigan, Calgary, Alberta. Arctic dips to 76 degrees below zero. Record Montana snowfall for the season. Record snowfall in Japan. 20 inches of snow in Chicago, possible by Saturday night. Northern France hit by heavy snow. There's your catastrophic global warming update. And one last piece. You might have heard about this island in the South Pacific called Tuvalu. And the reason this was in the news is this was a dream come true for the environmentalists because it looked like this was an island that was being swallowed up by the oceans. Remember, rising oceans were going to inundate islands and inundate Manhattan. And Tuvalu, here it is. It's happening right in front of our very eyes. Well, they have studied this island nation for years. Last week, scientists at the University of Auckland published results in the journal Nature Communications. The study said this: sea level rise and climatic change threaten the existence of atoll nations. Inundation, erosion are expected to render islands uninhabitable over the next century, forcing human migration. Here we present analysis of shoreline changes in all 100 islands in the Pacific atoll nation of Tuvalu. Using remotely sensed data, changes analyzed over the past 4 decades when local sea level has risen at twice the global average. Results highlight a net increase in land area in Tuvalu of 2.9% of total area, despite sea level rise. Land area increase in 8 of the 9 atolls. So rather than the island shrinking and being inundated, it's actually growing and has been growing for 4 decades. All right, that's enough of your catastrophic global warming update for the day. Let's go to the phone. Sam in Ferry, Georgia. Sam, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Okay, thank you for taking my call, Brian. Just a couple of comments on the budget passed Friday. And both of my senators voted for it, so I wrote them a letter. And a couple of things I think are interesting. I think the filibuster, the 60-vote thing, forced the Republicans' hand on this to get something through fast. I think that was why, things were so rushed because of 60 votes. And then the other thing, I think, like you say, this increasing debt is going to make foreign investors like the Chinese will push the interest rates up so Chinese can make it more attractive because there's more risk. So I think it has to push interest rates up. So that's the two comments I had on the budget, and I wrote both my senators on this. So
Listen, I appreciate that, Sam. And Sam is exactly right. That's why we don't like this fake-a-buster. The fake-a-buster means that the Republicans cannot pass something with just 51 votes. There's 51 Republican senators. If they didn't have this fake-a-buster, which Mitch McConnell insists on keeping in place, if they didn't have this fake-a-buster, then the Republicans could pass whatever budget they wanted with 51 votes. But they keep the fake-a-buster, and in part, I think what Sam is pointing out, it gives them an excuse to raise the budget. It gives them an excuse to capitulate to the Democrats. They hold their hands and say, well, there's nothing we could do. We had to get 60 votes. Don't blame us. All right, good call, Sam. I appreciate that.
That's even harder when one of those is McCain or Flake,
Yeah. So, all right, let's go to Charles in Lewisburg, West Virginia. Charles, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, good to see you. I hope you're feeling better.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. The unfunded liabilities, it just irritates me when Social Security is included in that, because you and me and Jeff and everybody has paid into that all their lives. That's my only source of income. I paid into it since I was 13 years old and working, and Congress squandered that money. It's supposed to have been in a lockbox, but they blew it, and now it's unfunded. It's just not fair. It's not right. I don't know what to do about it.
And there really isn't anything that can be done about it. I mean, Social Security is going to go broke in about 2034. Medicare is going to go broke about 2027. I mean, they're going to be completely out of money. They're going to have to reduce benefits by about 25% in order to be able to have money going out the door for Social Security recipients. And so, and that's because they spent the money when it was coming in. More money was coming in than they needed to pay out to recipients because there were fewer Social Security recipients. They said, found money. They started spending it. They wrote themselves IOUs. So that so-called Social Security Trust Fund is nothing but a box with a whole bunch of IOUs in it. All right, let's go to James in Martin, Tennessee. James in Martin, Tennessee, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir. I just was listening when you was talking about the young white lady and the black male that was in the Winter Olympics thing, and he said that the whole thing was biased or was racist. You was talking about it was a flip of a coin, and that was a time-honored traditional way of saying, Lord, we're going to leave it up to you. Well, if that's true, I really feel for the young man, because he needs to think about what he's doing, because to me, what he just did is he called God a racist.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation, James. I'm looking here at Proverbs 16:33, which is talking about a situation like this. The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. So James is exactly right. If you complain about the result of a coin toss and think the result is racist, you're accusing God of being a racist. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio. Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
American Family Association, a ministry with a mission to inform, equip, and activate people like you to strengthen the moral foundations of American culture and to give aid to the church here and abroad in her task of fulfilling the Great Commission. We couldn't do it without your day-to-day support. American Family Association. Find us online at afa.net.